and welcome to the Safe Scene and Stretch book study. I'm author Schmidt Hasson, and today we're unpacking Chapter 2, Lessons on Vulnerability. We know learning is full of risks, so is teaching. But if we can create a safe space and encourage our students to take the risks and model risk-taking ourselves, the rewards are worth it. Ready to talk about vulnerability? Let's do this. Learning is risky business for our students. Anytime they're learning something new, they're likely to make a mistake. They worry about what others might think, that they might look a little foolish trying something new. And whenever they answer a question, share an opinion, an idea, or something they've created, they risk potential humiliation and rejection. For some of our students, this has happened often enough that they spend all of their energy being hypervigilant. They've built up these walls to ensure that they will never feel humiliated or rejected in the classroom again, and so they don't take the risks needed for learning and growth. It's up to us to try to create a safe space to encourage them to take those risks, to respond to their mistakes with patience and kindness, and to ensure that their classmates do the same. In Chapter 2, we met Justin, who told the story of Mrs. Downey. And like so many of you, she was brilliant in the way she softened this group of hardened middle school boys. Justin said he'd been with the same group of boys since elementary school, when they were all identified as having reading challenges. And they were placed in this intensive reading class together with Mrs. Downey in 6th grade. They wouldn't read out loud, they wouldn't answer questions. She had a really hard time assessing them, but also pushing them to try to improve their learning, to grow. But she also had a brilliant plan. Mrs. Downey had these 2 guinea pigs, Lenny and George, and she would let the boys go and softly read out loud to the guinea pigs. They loved it. She made them responsible for the guinea pigs' care, and they started to feel confident. And she used those guinea pigs in her own caring way, in ways that drew out those hardened middle school boys and encouraged them to take risks. And Justin said he began to take risks in that classroom that he never had before. And he experienced growth as a reader as he never had before. And Miss Downey really helped him take down those walls and open up. What a beautiful gift she gave him, and he still remembers her all these years later. Researcher and author Brene Brown says that vulnerability is the birthplace of creativity, joy, and connection. These are certainly things we want for our students. So part of our job is to help them see that the rewards are worth the risk, to help them value their own learning and growth enough to take the risks necessary to get there. Yes, we do that by creating safe spaces in our classroom for them to take those risks. But we also do that by modeling vulnerability ourselves. For so many of us as educators, part of our identity is tied up in our feeling of competence in teaching. And when we try something new, we risk that sense of competence. But that's the only way we grow professionally. It's the only way we continue to make an impact on our students. So being courageous enough to try something new, being courageous enough to have honest conversations with our colleagues about when we're struggling, about what's hard for us, asking for advice and feedback, helps us build those connections, helps us grow professionally, and is a beautiful model for our students. When we are honest, when we tell our own truth about the mistakes we've made, about the ways we've struggled, we give our students and our colleagues permission to do the same. One of the most vulnerable things we can do as humans is to try to connect with other humans, especially for us as teachers trying to connect with students. When a student is struggling, we may worry that their own emotions will bring up uncomfortable emotions for us. We may worry that we'll say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing or maybe make a difficult situation even worse. It's really hard to show up and connect when someone's going through a difficult time. But in Chapter 2, my grad student Beth, shared this beautiful story of connection with her first grade teacher, Miss Rivers. Although I had taught Beth for a year, this was a story I'd never heard before. She said that when she was in first grade, her older brother was suddenly killed in an accident. She felt like things would never be normal again. She would never be happy again. She'd been home from school for about 2 weeks when there was a knock on her front door. It was her teacher, Miss Rivers. She said Miss Rivers came in quietly and sat down next to her in the living room, and she put a plastic jug on the table. It had a stick and something that looked like a leaf on the end. And Miss Rivers explained to Beth that it was a chrysalis, and inside was a butterfly. And that butterfly would struggle for a while, but in the end it would come out stronger and more beautiful, and so would Beth. And Beth said it was true. She watched that stick in that jug for about 2 weeks, and then the chrysalis began to shake. A butterfly struggled to come out, and in the end it flapped its wings, and Beth kept it for a little while, and then she took it outside and let it fly away. And she realized she would always struggle with the loss of her brother, that things would never be the same, but she would be okay. Beth has stayed connected with Miss Rivers. They're both teachers now. For decades, they've been connected and close. And I think about the courage it took for Miss Rivers to go into a home so fraught with sadness and grief and loss. And if I'm honest, I have to admit that I'm not sure I would have been courageous enough to do that. I may have called and hoped I could leave a message on voicemail, sent flowers or a card, but to go into that home took such courage. She took a risk. She risked her own, emotions coming up that probably felt overwhelming. She risked how the family might respond to her and all of their grief. But in the end, the reward of making a lasting impact on a little girl was worth the risk. And so for us as teachers, we have to push past that discomfort, to push past our own fears, and genuinely try to connect with a student. Because just showing up is what's important. We don't have to know the right things to say. We don't have to know all the right things to do. We just have to be there. Chapter 2 helped you think about the importance of vulnerability for you and your students. I hope it helped you consider the way we build these protective walls around ourselves and how those walls can prevent us from learning and growing and connecting. Of all the chapters in the book, I think this one impacted me the most personally. It pushed me to be more courageous. It pushed me to really go out, connect with people, listen to their stories. It pushed me to do scary things. To be honest, creating these videos feels very vulnerable. But I hope you'll go out and do brave things too. Coming up, I've got reflection questions for you. Reflection question 1. Think about what you were like at the age of the students you teach. When did you armor up, protect yourself, resist taking a risk? Where did you feel safe enough to take the risks required for learning and growth and connection? Why did you feel safe in those spaces? Thinking about this might help you create the kind of space where your students will open up, take risks, and be courageous enough to be vulnerable. Reflection question 2. When do you put up protective walls as a teacher? How might your willingness to be vulnerable or not impact your teaching? How might it impact your connections with students and colleagues? Feel free to pause the video if you need to and take some notes, because coming up, we've got this week's challenge. This week, I challenge you to practice vulnerability by sharing something you've created with someone else. It could be something you've written, it could be art that you've made, or if you haven't created something lately, you can share the story of a struggle with someone else. Be open and honest, And then think about what that experience was like for you. Did it feel freeing? What did it do for your connection with that other person? Did your willingness to be vulnerable encourage them to be vulnerable in return? Do you feel like it brought you closer? If you're feeling extra brave, you can share your experience in the comments with this video. Being vulnerable is not easy, but as Dr. Brown says, it is the path to greater creativity, joy, and connection. I thank you for reading Safe, Seen, and Stretched. I thank you for following along with these book study videos. Can't wait to see you again next week when we unpack Chapter 3.
Don't miss any of our upcoming content. Subscribe to this YouTube channel. And we'd love it if you'd head over to Amazon and leave a review of Safe, Seen, and Stretched in the Classroom. It will help other readers find the book.